Hello and welcome to day 4 of the RISE PICO World Summit 2025, the 12th edition of a very unique convening of thought leaders, practitioners, learners, and the spectrum in between. What is uncommon about them is the spirit to collaborate for greater good. And what is common about them is the belief in the RISE values: responsible, inclusive, sustainable, and ecosystem friendly. The summit got off to a resounding start 3 days ago and will see over 100 sessions co-created and co-located in multiple cities with almost the same number of partners and over 200 experts from around the globe for a community that is now 9,000 strong from 83 countries. We hope you'll explore the platform throughout the week. Welcome also to this very special roundtable where we talk about gender, a fireside chat on engaging men at the workplace to address gender-based and sexual harassment, such a critical part of our lives, our relationships with each other across the gender divide, and what happens when it is negative, but also what is possible when it is positive. He with She is an initiative by Idobro and Rise Infinity Foundation. We are so pleased to partner with Harish Sadani, the founder of MAVA, Men Against Violence and Abuse, who will be in conversation with Asiya, Shervani, D&I National Consultant and Gender Trainer. We are looking forward to learn and take away concrete actionables back to our lives, communities, and workplace. May I please have Harish and Asiya on the stage, please. Asiya? Exactly. Great.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Karen. And thank you to the RISE team and Idobro team. I know how many people it takes to organize an event at this scale. Thank you so much for all the support you've been giving us backstage. Hello, Harish. How are you doing? I hope you're doing well.
So I'm going to leave both of you to this conversation, and of course to all those who are watching you today and maybe even later, because the video will be available on demand, but of course live is much better. So thank you very much and have a great conversation.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Karen. Yeah, so Harish, I love jumping to the point right away. And before I ask you, the specifics of the work you do and, what MAVA does. MAVA is, as you all know, Men Against Violence and Abuse. I want to ask you a question which is uppermost on my mind before we come to the specifics. Because in the last few weeks, the workshops I've been doing in different organizations, although a whole lot of men, participants are very positive about this whole gender empowerment thing, and they're very sympathetic, towards the cause, and they believe that we should have more inclusive workspaces. But in every workshop, there are always a few, and because they're there in every workshop, you can say that they're quite substantial. So there's a substantial number of people, men specifically, cis men, who seem to have this perception that women are monsters, they are liars, and their only aim in life is to get innocent men to suffer and trap them and get them stuck in some legal cases. They don't say this directly, but the way their questions are framed around this concern that what if they are lying, as though women lie all the time, and that it is actually men who are being exploited by women. It is men who are being demeaned, and it is men who are suffering, not the other way around. So before we get into anything else, I want your take on this. Is this true? Do you also experience this? And how do you process this? You're on mute. You need to unmute yourself. Yeah.
Hello, is it audible now? Yeah.
Yes.
So, thank you, Asiya, for the introduction. And, I believe like one clarity, if all of us in the field can think of, that what are we fighting in our quest for a gender equal society, for an inclusive society. In all this fight, our enemy is not men per se. Our enemy is the male dominated mindset. And one of the underlying thing when we talk about male dominance, patriarchy, unequal power relations is at the core. So, obviously men are at the upper hand and they enjoy privileges. So, even in the 21st century today, you see that women, highly empowered, economically well off, also for some reasons, for some factors, have to depend on men. So, decision making is not fully, of hers as an independent person. So, as a result, what happens? In my 35 years of my work in the field, I have not seen that women are having a grudge, and so therefore there is a male versus female kind of thing. Feminism is a much abhorred and misunderstood word. So the feminist movement, to which we all are in a way grateful, that we are not saying that it is a men versus women kind of thing, but the kind of work which I have been doing vis-a-vis, there are some men's rights groups in our country. They are the ones using occasions like the men's day to resort to woman bashing. And so even if there may be some percentage of women who may be maltreating the men in their lives, they try to sensationalize it, saying that a large number of women are doing, without providing any substantial data or statistics. So I find they are creating a hype and sensationalism. And in fact, Men's Day is wrongly celebrated with that context that, it's men versus women. Whereas actually for Men's Day, just like Women's Day, if it has to be celebrated, it should be in the spirit of understanding men, their state of affairs, why it is so, and therefore a reflection and self-introspection. I think that is what even still possible, and which all people, whoever might be thinking of Men's Day, they should think that, are we really looking at the significance of the day for this purpose? So we have a long way. So these are all misconceptions and, I think misrepresentations of the facts that, the fact remains that largely power lies with men in a patriarchal, male dominated society of ours. So that needs to be questioned and interrogated, by all. Yeah.
Absolutely, makes a lot of sense. Harish, you've been a pioneer in the space of gender and masculinities in India, right? You founded MAVA 35 years ago, and at that time, even now, this concept that we have to engage men, is not so well understood. But I can just imagine 35 years ago how difficult it must have been for you to get through to people and say that no, let's work on men as well. So why did you think then that it was important to engage men, and why do you still think it's important to engage men in this work? And also explain us a little bit, why do we use the term masculinities now, right? So we thought masculinity was a word, but what are the many kinds of masculinities? Help us understand that as well.
Yeah, so you're right. So when we say gender is a social construct vis-a-vis sex, which is a natural construct. So when we say gender is a social construct, so similarly, masculinity also is socially constructed and shaped. The famous quote by Simone de Beauvoir, the French writer, that a woman is not born as a woman. So I think it applies to even men that, the faulty socialization, upbringing, where ideas about a dominant model of masculinity are being reinforced and perpetuated by all the subsystems of our society. the key subsystems, I would say the family, religion, education, governance, and media. They are all have been reinforcing. So as a result, what happens? The dominant model gets projected, but as you said rightly, masculinity has to be used in plural. So there are other forms of masculinities also, like the complicit form of masculinity, subordinated, where there may be situations where women are in position of power and men are, subordinated. And there are some marginalized men also. So, and also the expectations of society that men have to be, traditionally they have to be provider, protector, always an achiever. So I think we have to also examine that men are unable to, and they are told that they should not openly talk about their emotions. They should, control, including crying as a form, of expression. So I think men expressing their anguish, their vulnerabilities, their anxieties is equally necessary. Those kind of spaces need to be given in society, including workspaces, for them to open up and, them to be also empathetic to the other gendered beings. So I think, so as you asked rightly, 35 years ago, I mean, we were in a way ahead of our times. I would also say 35 years hence also we are ahead, because this idea, by many stakeholders, still not fully, even in terms of theoretically, even if they agree, the question which often people ask us, that do really men change? When such a question is asked, I have to ask that, is there enough investment done in men? So when you work closely with a group of men, and consistently, and enable them those safe spaces where they can reflect, where they can examine, where they can interrogate the dominant form of masculinity, then I think they will also evolve alternate forms of masculinity and be able to redefine it, which is what, with the young men, I and my team have been working, in colleges, universities, and even in workspaces. So I find that there is a gradual shift in their attitudes, beliefs, because, they have been raised in a very traditional way, men and younger boys. So I think once you give them those space, and in a youth friendly manner, in which they can connect with these issues. Because right now, as you said rightly, these issues for a long time were seen as women's issues, and the only change which we see that they are equally of other minorities as of now. But as you said rightly, cis and heterosexual men, who are the people with privilege and power, they also need to be transformed in the process. So it's a
I just love the words reflection, introspection, transformation, because, we might as well not do this work if we are not doing it genuinely. Because it's very easy to pick up this language of equality and sound very woke, I mean, lately we've heard about so many cases where, men who actually sort of the best word I can think of is pretended to be feminist. They said all the right things, but when you dig deeper, it is all an act that is being put up, right? So I think the key words here are to reflect genuinely and to make genuine changes first in your thinking. And then, of course, on the actions that you take in life and how you live your life and how how you interact with people who you're working with or who you're close with. So it's very easy to fake it these days. That has been my experience. It's very easy to put on and to perform, right?
yeah.
Um, so how this brings me to my next question, which is probably my favorite question because it's about action and it's about making a difference. So, how has the work that you have been doing in the space of engaging men and boys in conversations and in various projects that you do, which are associated with gender transformation, how have they contributed meaningfully to society? What are some of your success stories? Have you seen men changing their, harmful, dominant outlooks? And also, there are two parts to this question. So, one is, have you seen this change? And the second is, what kinds of tools and strategies and methodologies have you co-designed in, have you designed and created in MAVA? What are the tools, some of your favorite tools that you use?
Yeah. So, as you can empathize, like when we work with women, there are certain other kinds of methodologies and tools. The moment women are in the space, they feel a sense of liberation, with the few exercises one does. But for men who have been enjoying privileges for longer, they need, instead of lectures or talks, they will need interactive sessions where, they are able to talk their innermost thoughts as well as listen to some newer thoughts. So, in such a kind of experiential sharing atmosphere, we do a series of workshops which are participatory. We do boot camps for young men in colleges, universities, at workplaces. So, where those spaces you are giving them, where they can reflect, where they can, re-look at the gender norms that they have been observing, certain beliefs which they have been carrying, in a non-judgmental way. And you are also making them rethink that, you can redefine masculinity by, setting an example with self. Because I find that, in our society, there is a woeful dearth of male role models. So as a result, we have to tell that, in your own small ways, small and incremental changes you can bring about. So what I do is, the youth with whom we largely work over the years, I enable young men to first draw up an action plan for themselves, personal change plan, where they will talk about the things that they have been enjoying as privileges and what kind of restrictions are on the woman in their lives. So when they are able to examine, and then how they can provide those spaces where women can also enjoy freedoms, without the kind of chivalrous kind of attitude, and at the same time do something collectively in their neighborhood, in their sphere of influence. Because I feel, earlier you mentioned about, intergenerational dialogue. So elderly men with wisdom, with their kind of unlearning what they have done, if they were suppose using swear words earlier and after reflection they realize that it is wrong, they can stop it at any moment and they can share. Just like what we had seen in Alcoholic Anonymous, AA kind of loops, where, former drinkers are coming at a space with the idea of stopping alcoholism. So I think similarly, bad habits may take time to change, but somewhere, if a beginning is done, and especially with the young generation, who are used to the phrase that men will be men, boys will be boys, those need to be questioned and challenged. And I think elderly men, senior men, retired men, they all have a role to play, apart from other stakeholders. So I think, we consciously make an effort. So, a magazine by men, for men, which is in Marathi, we have elderly men writing their experiences, their first person account. Even youth, young generation, first generation boys are writing their experiences. So you are giving those spaces where they can reflect, where they can talk their innermost thoughts, insecurities, and the like. And so similarly, we have a magazine, we have workshops that are ongoing, and recently we have even brought out a manual where certain exercises that can be adapted in any setting, including a parent, a would-be father, can go through those modules and exercises, and they can adapt and they can start conversation. Because I think that is what is so necessary, that we when we talk to girls and even women at the workplace, we say that what are the small ways in which POSH, for example, prevention of sexual harassment, there are measures in place, but what proactive measures can be done to engage the male team members, the male employees at the workplace. I think that is, at the moment there are gaps which I
Yeah.
see. Yeah.
Very well said, Harish. I don't think this kind of transformational work, transformative work can happen if the environment is confrontational or if it's aggressive. So I think creating those safe and brave spaces where we can open up, where we can talk. And yes, Alcoholics Anonymous is a great example. I think, such organizations and such communities rather have helped a lot of people. So that's really, well said. And also, a lot of organizations reach out, I'm sure, to you and to people like me as well on mental health and emotional health, especially of men, of everyone, but also cis men, the heterosexual men. And I think even there, what you said is a key, is a clue to helping that. So even as far as our socio-emotional and our mental health is concerned, if we create safe spaces where people can be genuine, where people can, talk about what's bothering them in a safe space where they're not going to be judged, as you said. So I think, we love to label initiatives as DENI and as employee engagement and as other things, and all these things are great. But the goal of many of these things is, pretty similar. And I think we should sort of consolidate some of these fragmented efforts in various organizations. You talked about POSH, prevention of sexual harassment, and that is something that's a topic on which I've, also worked quite a bit. And my take on this is that things have overall improved. I'm the external member on some of the ICs which are doing really, really good work. ICs means internal committees, the committee that investigates a complaint regarding sexual harassment. So things are overall definitely improving, but I think you mentioned there are huge gaps.
Yeah.
Many organizations have still not formed these committees. I keep hearing in various colleges and universities, what are students begging for? Please form an IC. Please create an IC, which is their legal right. It is the right of every student or every employee to have an internal committee, and they are still, begging for that. So, and the top management, employer, whoever seems to be dragging their feet. And even when they form internal committees, they are untrained. The IC members often are very regressive in their thinking. And they have not understood that their role is not just to investigate a complaint, but to lead and oversee preventative measures, preventative efforts, right? So these are some of the gaps I've noticed, that the committee thinks that they just need to jump into action when somebody complains, which is so wrong. They should actually be, continuously making efforts throughout the year, even if nobody complains, because it is their job to kind of see the red flags and take action. So, what are some of your thoughts on this, and how can we engage men in posh work?
Yeah.
What about this?
Yeah, so you rightly said that, redressal is one part which is largely focused. If at all, there are some corporates, business organizations doing across the country, but redressal is one part. In fact, the law original also, which has come into being after so much of effort, the first word is prevention. And I find that, prevention efforts are being lacked. There is a woeful dearth. So, and creatively, I find that, employees and top management of organizations can, encourage, say, for example, ERG, employees resource group. So, you can have a senior creative bent employees can facilitate conversations which are normal day to day, through which the message that you are taking zero tolerance seriously at the workplace. So unless the conversations begin, employees also would feel that confidence of mustering that courage to come ahead and make a complaint. So I think initial step, and also the normalization of violence that we see in our day to day. Often, what happens, people talk about grave or aggravated form of harassment or abuse, but I think the misogyny and casual sexism, which you find in many corporates, also in any other organization, including educational institutions. So I think employees can play a role in facilitating. Now, for example, like even the redressal committee, if it is supposed to be led by a woman, half of the members should be women, but it doesn't mean that the remaining half can't be men. And often out of tokenism, one man is taken on the committee, but instead two or three men, if they are there, and their role is also encouraged for preventative work, then I think it will go a long way, because including the top management, um, a male director attending any workshop may not be, throughout present, but a slightly coming and addressing, which is what in the few corporates that we have worked in the last few years, I have seen, we have used film screenings as an important tool, where short films, documentaries, livid examples of a trans person. Similarly, what a woman's role in society is. So if you have deliberations via film screenings, then people are able to interrogate, and there is a channelized, guided conversation happening. You have experts. So I have found, when people have taken note of our work using film screenings, theater, there are many corporates inviting us across the country for their plants, for their locations across, and asking us to how best, with the limited time, even if it can be like four screenings of short duration film for 2 hours or 3 hours, and that has worked. So I think innovative, paternity leave, for example, as a policy is given by many corporates, but the experience one has found that, men who get that leave, they fritter it literally, because they don't know exactly how to use it. And this is because there have been no conversations around it. While the intention is very good in giving the leave, but you find that in such examples, the women are told to go to her uh, parents' place, familiar place, and the husband might just visit during those leave days. But what is his role as a would-be parent is not at all deliberated, not at all talked. We facilitate it in a very well-known company which is known for advertising work. And we tried this for 3 sessions where, we facilitated the young woman parents as well as male employees as to how equal parenting as an idea can be, imparted. So there were practical things which they were shared by both, as to how men are also, told in specific ways, you should not do this and all that, household chores and all. So I think, battling with all these and navigating, you need conversations, and I think those have to be, used fruitfully by many companies and business organizations. So
Oh, yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think we need to talk much more about the benefit of nurturing and caring, and actually many of these are learned skills, are learned traits, and women also have to learn them. We are also not born knowing exactly how to look after a baby. I think we learn it. Women in our families play a role in passing that information on, and that information can as easily be passed on to men. And so yes, I think that's a great point, that maybe we need to talk more about it, and we need to do some skill building, and the long term benefits of loving and caring, for children and for each other is hugely beneficial. um one thing that I wanted to also discuss with you, the 2013 Act, this posh act that we've been talking about, actually clearly puts the onus of sexual harassment prevention and redressal work on the employer. In other words, what we call top management leadership. They are supposed to be taking all possible preventative steps to eradicate
Yeah.
all categories of gender based harassment, right? Which, as you kind of alluded to, but I want to pull that out from what you said. It's not just about, the groping, grabbing, and assault, kind of sexual harassment, but unconscious biases, microaggressions, verbal and non-verbal behaviors which convey hostility, unsolicited advice that we keep giving to women, unwanted sexual attention, looking cute, you look good in red dress, and, just going on with those compliments, which rather than complimenting women about work and what they bring to the table. So even those are included, not just the outright forms of sexual misconduct, which may involve abuse and assault. So eradicating all this is not just the internal committee's responsibility, it is the employer's responsibility to promote a culture where sexual harassment is unacceptable. And I think a good place to start is by doing knowledge sessions on how to break with the gender binaries. Because at the core of all this, patriarchal thinking lies these stereotypical notions that this is a man's work, this is a woman's work, men are better at this, women are better at that, all these myths which you mentioned, some of them, boys will be boys, women are better at multitasking. It's just a way to make women slog much more while we pay them much less, right? So, what specific measures do you think that civil society and universities and government institutions, like the police, the administrative services, etc., what kind of work can they do in breaking gender binaries, and what kind of help can MAVA provide to them? So, firstly, it's their intention. They have to have the intention to do this work. They have to have the intention to challenge status quo, and once they're ready to do that, they will need help of people like you and me. So, what can MAVA specifically do here?
Yeah, so I think there are many proactive measures which can be taken, to address this. The DEI which you referred, diversity, equity, and inclusivity. So I think as a part of that, how, male employees also can be, harnessed, cis and heterosexual male employees, because while there are efforts, you find DEI and all where LGBTQI individuals are given spaces. I think that heterosexual cis men also need proactively to be brought in, the conversations which are happening. So as you said rightly, questioning the heteronormativity also in a way, and men realizing the privileges that they have been enjoying, and if we say social construct gender is, then the various different forms of expressions and diversity in terms of identities also need to be talked to and deliberated, at the workplace. So I think once the binary is broken, then you are able to also realize that men's mental health, for example, the topic that you said, that the onus or the burden on performing certain roles will no longer, because of the stereotypes and the traditional notions that have been passed on from generations and years, that men have to be the main bread earner. So, notions like these can be questioned. And also, when you break the binaries, then, women's role also can be, recognized, that with the changing times, how women have been adapting and doing multiple roles in society. So I think series of sessions can be planned by companies, and we are there to provide resources, materials, and also sometimes tailor made, sometimes certain sessions which can be done, using games, exercises like case stories. You show case stories, you have small video clips, and you facilitate those conversations. I think those are doable things, and already a few corporates and organizations have been approaching us. Universities, as you mentioned, now, the Ministry of Higher Education has sent directives to all universities and colleges across the country that they should appoint what is called gender champions on their campuses. So I think, where and they are clearly saying it should be voluntary. They are saying that the gender champions can be among boys, not just among girls, but boys and non-binary youth. So I think the more number of gender champions, so in a way, organizations have to align with the existing mechanisms so that you don't have to create something new. It's already there, it's been institutionalized, and so why not use that opportunities? Now these would be champions, gender champions, whether it can be in corporates, workplace. They are not going to be generated automatically, so they have to be nurtured. You have to engage in a series of processes where they are reflecting, where they are taking initiatives, where they are given importance, also as would be gender champions. So I think that is what, like in the olden days, like when you said that you were a scout member, and wore a badge, there was a sense of accountability and, associated with that. So I think we need men of substance, while there is no dearth of, men as achievers in terms of professionalism, but as a person of metal, and standing up for the human rights of any gender. So I think, that has to be nurtured, those kind, so championing the cause of living the life of dignity and
Absolutely.
safety. Yeah.
And absolutely. And this is not a war. So it's so terrible to hear terms like the gender wars, because, whatever work we are doing is good for everyone, people across the gender spectrum. So thinking in terms of this versus that, that's a very outdated and a very regressive way of thinking. I think we have to think of all of us moving together in a framework of love and affection and concern and care for each other. And I think there's a lot for corporations and various kinds of organizations to learn from what you just said. All they have to pretty much do is create these safe learning platforms and forums where people can open up and have discussions and truly be vulnerable. And I think when you find people in the room who are being vulnerable and genuine, it kind of it's contagious. So you yourself become vulnerable and genuine, and instead of blaming others, you also reflect, and and I think that change that stems from this kind of reflection is so much more valuable. And I think it's something that the world needs much more of. Um, I'd like to ask the audience if they have any questions. You can always unmute yourself and ask, or you can type it out. We have about 10 minutes or so left. So if there are any audience questions, we'd love to hear from you.
Hi, ma'am. There is a question. I'm not sure if you can see it in the Q&A session. There is a question asked by Suhail. Does MAVA do training for men who would like to initiate conversation around gender and masculinity with their male colleagues in the workplace?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, MAVA does that. So let me repeat the question for Harish. Harish,
Yeah.
Suhail is asking that does MAVA do this kind of training, these sort of very conversational trainings? So absolutely, Suhail, MAVA does a lot of these non-PPT kind of trainings, which are about conversations. I'll let Harish talk a little more about it. So gender, masculinity, and yes, absolutely. Please go ahead, Harish, and maybe you can give an example of the kind of work you've done in corporates.
Yeah, yeah. So, there are corporates, as I was telling you earlier, the medium of film screenings, calm interactions we have used, and specifically, webinars, and also some specific interactive sessions like a TOT, training of trainers. Some corporates have asked, and we are, tailor making, so that there's a continuity in the kind of DEI exercises they have been already doing, but adding this dimension on inclusion of male employees. I think that can be, surely we have our team members who can facilitate these conversations, and, we can work organization by organization as to case, what can be, best provided, to facilitate those conversations and interactions. So I think already, there are efforts happening from our side also, and also corporates inviting, but we'll be more than happy to, explore with newer
Yeah,
organizations.
like, I work quite frequently with Harish. So, Sohail, once there's this, a few years ago, we had this organization that reached out to us, a very big manufacturing organization, which said that we've recently started taking in women in our factories. So, our first question was, how are they doing? And they said they're doing very well. But the problem is that the men seem very uncomfortable and they're not happy, and their thinking is that they're taking away our jobs. So that was the specific, unique requirement, that they came to us with. And so we did workshops for the men there to sort of help them understand, gender dynamics and to sort of reflect. So yes, we do a lot of work on gender and masculinities with organizations. Any other questions?
We have added Suhail to the live stream. He can ask.
Yeah.
Thank you. Since there are no other questions, just to follow up, I mean, I work with a small, medium-sized NGO, and we've often had people from the outside come and do workshops, and they've never been really satisfactory. I don't mean on gender, but on various things, mental health and so on. And the kind of conversations that have worked, tended to work the best, are those initiated and led by people within the organization, it seems. So my question was not necessarily an external agency coming in, but rather for somebody like me or a couple of people going out and getting trained and then coming back and bringing those skills to the organization. That's the sort of thing I was thinking about.
Absolutely. So I think Harish mentioned TOT, so we can
Right.
train the trainer so that you're right. These conversations are best held internally, but there's a little skill to
Of
it.
course.
Uh,
Exactly.
and
Yes.
some models and
Yes.
techniques that,
Yes.
why reinvent the wheel, basically.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
Thank you so
yes,
much. I'll be in touch then with Mava about this. Thank you.
great. Are there any other questions? So there don't seem to be any questions for now. Shilpa, can you see any?
Yeah, there's. Yes, there is a Mr.
Okay.
Harish, can you elaborate your success stories giving examples? Also, would like to know in these 35 years that MAVA has succeeded as a percentage.
So what was the question? Like, what has been the success like over the years, right?
No,
Hmm.
as a percentage that do you think you're 70%, so it's a guess kind of.
No, so I have found that we have mentored and equipped so many young men in their 20s and 30s as to how they can be peer educators, with at their workplace, at their educational institution. So, a large, I would say, like, say, modestly, even if I put 2,000 men, they have reached out to over 6 lakh plus other I'm just talking in the last 1 decade. But our work has been going on, with the young men and, uh, workplace situations last over 18 plus years. I'm just saying that we are able to see when you work consistently with a group, small incremental changes where they are taking stands actively for the women in their lives, and bringing those experiences, encouraging others. So that has been, because, questioning the structures of power will take a long while, the patriarchal forces. So I think the fact that there are men questioning the traditional, ideas about being a man, and, I think those are steps which are surely which can be gauged. So we use different methodologies to find out, we do pre and post test survey questionnaires in which we check, we do qualitative tests, where you interact as to how the experience has been with the participants. I think there's a question about posh
Yeah,
something.
there is a question about POSH. POSH Act is a gender specific act which creates a grudge within men during this kind of discussions. So, how to address?
Yeah, so I think earlier I was telling Asiya that, when we are crystal clear that who is our enemy, this is not a men versus woman kind of thing. You find humiliation of the genuine efforts of the women's movement by phrases like feminazi and all, are used to, dishearten them, those who are working very painstakingly and passionately over the years. So I think once that is cleared, that our enemy is the dominating mindset, which can be largely which is there in men, but it can be in any gendered person who is privileged. So I think once that is clear, then other men can in fact not just be allies, but they can be also stakeholders, they can be active, advocates for gender equity and talking about prevention of any kind of harassment at workplace. So I think,
So, the only way to get rid of this grudge is to get the internal committee to maybe do more awareness sessions, right? On why is this law gender specific? Of course, men can be harassed too. Of course, women can do terrible things as well, right? But why? What does the data say? So I think two things: relying on data when you're addressing this question, and secondly, doing more awareness session. This question is essentially coming from a lack of correct information and orientation, right? There's another question, Harish. Somebody wants you to talk more about the gender manual, and I have it right here with me.
Yeah.
yeah.
So this is what the manual looks like. And Harish, why don't you tell us more about it?
Yeah, so this was just a few months ago that we called it transforming masculinities, in plural. And actually, in our 32 years of existence, this is the first time a manual, because we have been doing several exercises, as I said, participatory workshops and modules. We thought, why not bring them as much, in one place, which can be easily understood and implemented. So, 1 hour, 1.5 hour session, what preparatory has to be done, what are the discussion points one has to bring in, sessions like privilege and power. So understanding privilege, those are so well explained, or how gender works as a system. So, you encourage people to think in smaller groups, like, oh, I never knew governance is such an important aspect. So, you have, uh, and also we have got case stories, we have got some video clips that you can show, like last time there were films like Kabir Singh and Animal. So we have had, including some positive shorter films like Juice, how to use those films and what kind of conversations you can generate. Those are also in that manual. So the manual is available in a offline, in a physical form. We are not giving it online, because we want to be encouraged so that people read it and reflect it. Also, we are willing to do TOTs on usage of the manual also. So right now, at a modest amount of 1,000 rupees, we are asking people to send in their addresses, and we can courier it with an extra 200 rupees courier charges. So, large number of organizations and individuals pan India have benefited in the last 4 5 months. Several orders have been placed, so we'll be more than happy. Our attempt is also to bring out such a manual in Hindi and Marathi within a year. Right now, this is in English, but this can be adapted. This can be used, by educators, people in the workplace, civil society bodies can make use of that, surely.
Yeah, in fact, if Suhail is still here, I mean, we forgot to tell him, in our response to his question. So a manual is a good place for you to start with, Suhail. You could perhaps order one and, start using it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions, or, even comments, or even
Yeah.
thoughts?
Yes, sir, there
Yeah.
is, there is. So, Loy sir is asking about MAVA, and there is another one question in the Q&A session. That was by Trivedi Milan. Kindly give examples of the change that you saw after your sessions.
Yeah, about which I earlier said that, incremental changes we are seeing with the men closely you are working, because, you need a series of interactions. One-off session, one-off workshop is not going to help. When you're talking about attitudinal change, you're talking changing of mindset. You have to invest in people, and over a time, you are able to, we also do external appraisals. So external people come and, interview some of those male participants. So that also should be done. But the idea is that, there should be an ongoing effort, in which, men are given the opportunities to open up, to speak, and, contribute, as just as any other employee of the
Yeah.
organization.
No, and Harish, I'd like to pitch in. And sometimes the change is quite quick also, if I may say. I remember we had one complaint in an organization where a young woman complained about one of her colleagues constantly WhatsApping her and requesting her to, go out with him and that kind of a thing. And she, we called him, we had a word with him. And because it was done in a safe way where we tried to understand where he was coming from, and we, sort of counseled him a bit that, this is not the way that one gets after a person. And we kind of even helped him with tips that if you really like someone, then, these could be better strategies. And I'm really happy to say that that young man actually transformed. And what he said was that nobody has ever talked to me about this. I've never had this kind of a conversation with teachers or parents. And as I grew up, the young men who were my friends gave me completely different messaging. So I thought that it was normal to get after someone and to stalk someone and to keep sending, a person excessive messages. So nobody has ever told me this. Nobody has had this conversation. So sometimes, to answer your question, Trivedi ji, it can be, you know, um, one conversation done in a kind, gentle, reassuring way. So I think we have to be nicer to each other, and we men have to care for women, women have to care for men, and they're not only women and men. Gender is a spectrum. There are a lot more genders, right? So I hope that addressed your question. So sometimes change can happen over the course of one conversation as well.
And I think the key is the co-creating that space, rather than leaving it to one, but all of us can contribute, towards that effort.
Uh, yeah. Yeah, we are kind of out of time. Thank you so much. It's always the participants who make every session unique. We've been talking about the same thing for over 30 years now. And of course, we've seen a lot of change, and we are very positive for the next 30 years. Every decade or so, you're fighting and, you're kind of addressing different issues because we have made a lot of headway. And thank you so much to all the participants. Thank you so much once again to Shilpa and all the organizers.